Sure, sure. I just want to let you know too that I'm gonna be recording, like audio recording this interview just for my records too. So okay, sure. Um, the main reason that I decided to run for a county commissioner is really because I love this valley. I grew up here. I love what it's given to me, what it's afforded me. I love Montana and I love our country. And uh, I I really see this office as the best way for me to express my personal passion to help protect and cultivate freedom for future generations and to encourage healthy local government and community growth. That's one of my key factors is healthy growth. I believe we're in a crossroads in our country and as a nation and even in our community, and we've seen a real abdicating of authority of what local government can and should do by having some clear vision for future growth and the expansion of the valley while still protecting property rights and civil and natural order and really the freedom from federal encroachment and overreach. And over the last couple of years, we've seen how fear has overtaken people's sense of their own God-given rights. And the best place for me to actively ensure this for my kids and for future generations is in the role of county commissioner, where I can work closely with other civic business leaders, municipal leaders to collaborate, share ideas, and help build that healthy community. I really want the county to be a beacon of good government, of effective departments and happy employees, so that our community wins together. Yeah, I'm just to kind of reiterate that point, but maybe to go deeper. Um, abdicating authority isn't where people make uh, always intentional decisions that harm people, but it's more that more could be done. More could be done to protect people against federal overreach. I think that we can do better. Um, Hold on just a second. I think that we can do better to protect people's privacy and medical freedom. I think we can do better at welcoming good ideas and good people who have moved here from other places that can help build the infrastructure that we need. And we can do better to ensure election integrity. We can strengthen public safety in multiple ways, but especially I'm a big supporter of the sheriff's department. I think in terms of funding, that's one area I wouldn't want to cut in the budget. But as a country, I think it's important that we renew our trust in God to help lead us where we need to go as a community, and really just not to abdicate our responsibility in local government to help protect all the people's freedoms. So those are some areas that I would definitely touch upon, and some of that's just more of a community sentiment than something that I would point to necessarily directly at the commission. But we've seen such immense growth here in the valley, and I grew up here, and I see how the attitude of like, let's just keep them out, keep them out, keep them out, like don't welcome anybody new here to the valley, how really that's hurt us, because not everybody who moves here with ill intent. And some people move here because they really value Montana values and way of life, and they want to contribute to the health and well-being of the valley. But we can do better at building bridges with those people, because maybe they bring good ideas, maybe they bring small business, maybe they bring things that can help build the infrastructure. And so that isn't something I would necessarily point to in terms of the commission, but it is something that I would point to in our community and say I think that we can do better. Right. Yeah. Sure. There's a lot of factors to consider in that. One is the Constitutional Initiative 121. I don't know if you know much about that, but it is something that, if it ends up on the ballot next fall, is likely to pass, just because of the way it's being presented to people, and it's the goal of it is, which I appreciate, is to put a cap um, on property taxes. But if that passes, I'm just giving you some context here before I answer your question. That the If it passes, the state says that we could experience a 9% loss in county revenue, which would be about $10 to $12 million of the county budget, which is significant. And so if that happens, like, we'd have to look at every department, that we I would go to the heads of all the agencies, the 23 or so agencies, and just say, look, where can you cut 10%? How can we do more with what we have? And that would be a message that I would send to all the county departments, is, look, if we have to scale things back, how can we maximize our resources? How can we double our effort with what we have? How can we multiply things with what we have? Um, so, I think the other departments that I would want to take a strong look at are the places that they spend the most money. So, besides the sheriff's department and the 911 emergency department, I wouldn't want to cut those. If anything, because of our growth in the valley, I'd probably want to increase that if we could. But the road department has almost 8 million. The library has 1.75 million. The health department has about 3 million. Transportation has about 2 million. Solid waste has close to 11 million. And there's the IT department that has about $1.6 million. So all of those are kind of like off the top, like the largest part of the budget. And, I don't want to accuse any one of them of wasting money, but when you spend that much money, there's a potential for waste. And I think that I would really want the leaders of those agencies to scrutinize their budget and really justify their expenditures, and say, like, where, you know make sure that there isn't waste there. So that's that would be one way of trying to reel in um, government, help government be transparent and accountable. So I hope that answers your question, but you can follow up with that if you need to. Okay. Right. Sure. Right. Y- Right. I would definitely still want to scrutinize it. It's just immense amount of funds, and like I said before, with that much money flowing, there's a potential for waste. And it doesn't mean that after if after the heads have scrutinized their own departments, maybe they come back to me and they say, look, this is how we justify it, and this is how we make our expenditures. Then then I then maybe we'd stay in the same game. Maybe we'd stay in that same place. But I definitely needs kind of an informal audit, if you will, not a formal one, but just taking a look at it, and I would still do it, even if 121 doesn't pass, just because I think it's important that the people of this county, get the maximum amount of what their taxes are paying for. That the government is responsible and accountable for what they do, and transparent in what they do. Um, I haven't sat in on the meetings, but I did read through a good bulk of the 400-page budget from this last year, and looked at the nitty gritty of what each department does, and where their expenditures are. But even in that, and I think even in their overview, there's still areas where there needs to be more specific uh, transparency about it. Just putting a title on $1 million here, $1 million there, isn't really like justifying it. It's just you've got, because that's how the budget is. When you read through it, I mean, it doesn't necessarily give you the brass tacks of it all, and so I I would would be look forward to working with Pete Melnick, and hearing firsthand, one on one, or in the meetings like that, just where they come to. And I'm not criticizing him in any way, or the finance director. I just want them, to be able to have a good justification for it all. So that's all. Yeah. Right. Well, I think in terms of any board, I would encourage appointments to the boards which are people who are people full of integrity and are hardworking people who have a vested interest in serving the community as a whole, without personal agendas, and people who promote natural and civil order, and really help the community continue to be a wholesome atmosphere for all its citizens. More specifically, with like the health board, I'd really want, if possible, to bring people in who have scientific background. Like I have a master's degree in science, and I'd really like to have people with good science background, just just to be able to bring good strategy to that area, and good accountability in that area, and I would say fundamentally too, people who are willing to protect people's freedoms, and um, protect the uphold the Constitution, the foundation of our country, and natural and civil order. Um, I would really encourage appointments to boards in those ways. Mhm. Sure. Well, I mean, I would say up front, I mean, your question's kind of irrelevant on most levels, simply because, I mean, she's not going to be serving on the board if I were, to come into the commission. And, um, but, I think it's important in science, the basis of science is that we have uh, a peer reviewed basis for making conclusions. It's not autocratic. You don't It's not meant to have one man standing at the head of the country telling everyone what medical advice to listen to or what science advice to listen to. The purpose of science is that you bring it before peers, including people that you might disagree with, and allow them their input, and in order to come to uh, good conclusions. And that's part of the rigorous nature of academic science, is that you place your papers, your publications, or your ideas before other people that might be harshly critical, or differ in their opinions. But the purpose of that is really to get to the ground zero of the data, the ground zero um, of the science of it, so that you come to good conclusions. Because if you're like, well, I don't like that person and I don't like what they have to say, we're just going to stay with what's comfortable. In science, you just end up with bad conclusions. Um so I in a future situation, I wouldn't be against, pointing her or somebody of similar caliber into that arena, especially given all that happened in the last couple years. We needed to have a deeper investigation. We needed to bring it before people with differing perspectives, because there seemed to be a kind of a one track um, publication of what was going on, and a censoring of anyone who dissented from that. Right. Yeah. Right. Right. Sure. Well, first off, I would say that largely that decision like lies with the legislature, for them to adjust things like that, because they do a cost of living assessment, and bring the county employee uh, wages in line with the cost of living. So it's I talked with somebody in HR a couple weeks ago, and that was telling me that it works a little slower uh, than the normal business market in terms of making that change. But I definitely think that it needs to keep pace. I think we need to value our employees in the county, to value people, and to do what we can to help them make the most of their living here. I also talked with somebody on the health board in their process of making that decision, that they had a lot of trouble, simply because, like the things that you mentioned, maybe they were from Seattle or Washington area, but they looked at the housing costs here, and they're like, I can't do it. I can't make the move, or they couldn't find a place. Even if they could afford it, they couldn't find a place. So there is like an underlying issue of housing that's just immense that we need to address to help cultivate people who are of high caliber who can afford to live here and can help serve our community well. So it's kind of a double-edged sword and double-edged problem, but I think that to address that issue, we need to approach the legislature and help them keep pace with it. But yeah, I definitely think we need to value our employees and do what we can to keep pace with the cost of living. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Sure. Yeah. I think first off, what I would say is that it's such an immense issue and problem that I don't think that government has the only piece of the puzzle. I think every sector can have a piece. Business can have a piece, and real estate can have a piece, and homeowners, the private sector has a piece, and nonprofits have a piece of the puzzle of helping solve the housing issue. And I mean, inflation is definitely part of it too. So you'd have to look at the federal government and the way that they're spending money, and so there's lots of factors involved. But I mean, first off, I want to kind of define what I look at as like healthy growth. To me, means like that median house prices track with median income, and we talked about this before. But median income correlates with the consumer price index or the cost of living, and then and also healthy growth means job markets that increase with the population growth. Um, so what the commission can do would would have to do with areas of taxes and zoning and planning and short-term rentals. So not increasing taxes or increasing taxes only in response to inflation has been the goal of the county, and I would stick with that, or an increase in new construction. But the other thing that I'd like to see, and this would kind of be more on a legislative area, but would be to change the term of an assessment, because the reassessment, because it used to be like 4 years before your property taxes would be reassessed for its value. And now I think it's down to like 24 months that it's reassessed, which means, every couple years your taxes can go up. And I'd really like to see some alleviation in terms, so that people could expect their taxes to be at the same place for like 4 years before they'd have to reassess. Um, I I I I believe that also changing the term of what a short term rental is uh, would also help with that. Like, what was the statistic I read? So a year ago, Daily Interlake had some article about the Flathead County has the highest volume of short-term rentals among all the Montana counties, and they said the statistic was 20. They had 2,800 short-term rentals. So I mean, some of that's people who are VRBOing their house, or which I'm not against, but some of it is you have foreign entities who um, have been approved, to short-term rent their property, but they're not people who live here. They're just entities who buy up the housing, and then know that they can capitalize on it, so that they end up eating up the housing that would otherwise be for people who would live here. So I want to put locals first. I believe in putting Montana first, and putting the valley first. So people who live here need to have a priority, uh, being able it shouldn't be a struggle for them to live here. They shouldn't have to compete with foreign entities that are um, that are displacing their housing. They need to have that assurance, and I think that's part of what the commission can do is to reel in some of those short-term rentals that are outside the scope of really what benefits the local community and local citizens. Sure. Right. Sure. You know, there's going to be a portion of the population that might disagree with me on this, but I'm just going to say that what we've seen over the last 2 years has been a massive overreach of autocratic federal overreach in terms of mandating what people should do, in terms of uh, you know manipulating or forcing people to take a preventative medical treatment that they may not agree with, and yet their livelihood is threatened because of it. Their job is threatened of it with it, and you don't see it incredibly well inside of Montana because we have a really great governor who came in and helped protect small businesses from litigation and did all kinds of work, and the legislator did some immense, amazing work to reel back some of those mandates and help open up Montana again and let people live their lives. So even on a local level, uh, I think I don't believe that that situation is going to be the only situation like that in the future, and we need strong local government that is going to stand up to that along with the legislature and the governor and say, we're going to do what's best for our citizens. We're going to help protect their freedom to choose and protect their livelihoods, and not let an autocratic decision, you know, uh, mandate to them in a way that is detrimental to their livelihood, to their health, to what their personal medical choice would be. So that's one aspect of it. I'm sure there's lots of different areas. I mean, guns have always been a critical part of Montana culture in the Second Amendment, and it's a constitutional right. Um, and it's not something I preach a lot about in my platform, but it is something that I think is important and needs to be held. So yeah. Yeah, yeah. There's still a place. I mean, I took a trip down to Los Angeles last summer, and it was like a different world, just and still is. I have friends down there. It's still is a different. They're still struggling to open things up, and I think having good local government can help with that. Having good state government can help with that. Right. Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. Some of my colleagues are going to disagree with me on this, but I don't really care. um, so, right, one of the ways that the marijuana was sold. I mean, full disclosure, I did not vote for the legalization of marijuana for recreational use or for um, medical use. I voted against that, but it's been the will of the people to the democratic will of the people. So we have to kind of work with what we've got. And one of the ways that it was sold to us was we can tax it. Like this will be a revenue source, and the state does tax it. Like you said, the state has like a 4% tax on medical marijuana and 20% tax for recreational use. But they sold it to us like, you're going to see this money come back in, education, la 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 la. But as a county, we're not seeing any of that. And I personally, I would want to tax it. The county could enact a 3% tax on marijuana, and I think that we should do that 3% tax. And here's part of my rationale before it. I think that there is a precedent already with alcohol use, especially with driving, that it's taxed in order to offset the liability, that the misuse of it. It's still illegal. In Montana, it's illegal to drive a motor vehicle under the influence of marijuana, and I think for the safety and well-being of others, that's part of the power of local government under the Constitution, is the welfare of the people, and a tax on marijuana could help offset the cost to the public for those harms. And yeah, I spoke with Brian Hano, the sheriff, last week, and like he was telling me basically all the issues that they're dealing with marijuana. I mean, certainly they're dealing with other hard drugs too, but just with marijuana, that it does present a significant liability to the public. And so what happens is, with that liability, we're already spending. It's already a cost. We're already spending money because of the misuse of it, which means that we're taking those funds from some other place. So I definitely believe that we should tax it as a county. And like I said, some colleagues would disagree with me on that, but I think that we should. Yeah, yeah, sure, yeah, sure, sure. Well, I want to say I've talked to the people in the election department too, and I just honored their role in it, because they've come under kind of needless attack, really, because they're just doing their job and doing it the best that they can. And I think that there's been people who've targeted them individually when that's not really where the solution to a problem of election integrity lies. You can't go to Debbie or the others there and say like it's your fault. Um, you need to change it. Like they're doing what they're instructed to do. And I most definitely believe that the 2020 election had very significant discrepancies across the nation, and potentially even in Montana. And the public has a right to verifiable and transparent elections. And And that really comes down to the use of the machines that we have. And there needs to be accountability. There needs to be transparency with the machines that we use, because right now they're not accessible. They can't audit the machines. They can't. Um, they're protected in a way that shouldn't be. And you go onto the county election site and they say we don't have modems. We don't use modems, and and I think that that's true, but what I would say is this. My idea is, especially in elections where there is um, controversial outcomes, or just places where there's a closer race, that you could take a random sampling of a district or an area, a random sampling, and using statistics, you can verify whether the machine counting was accurate or not. I mean, we learn it in college level statistics that you can compare the sample with the population and what the machine puts out. And if there's a grave error of deviation, then you know that there's something wrong. And that's when I would say that we could do better. If we did a random sampling, that this is my idea, is if we did a random sampling and there was an error, deviance that was too great, then they would be forced to go back and do a hand counting. I'm not against using machines, because we have like close to 60,000 voters in the valley and in the general election. And it's a matter of logistics. Like hand counting 60,000 ballots is an immense project. And I think that machines and computers can do a lot for us, but computers and technology don't we don't serve them, they serve us, and we need to keep them in their place of accountability, because even the computer, if it's not programmed right, or if there's some backdoor of anything, it needs some hand manual human accountability to keep it in check. So that's what I think we can do to do better. But I don't want to I don't want to come across as at all critical of the election department or people there, because I think that they're honorable people, and it's not what they're doing, it's the way that the it's been structured, that would kind of point the finger in their direction. So right, right, for sure. It's whenever there's machine counting, because I don't think that's going to go away. There needs to be some kind of manual verification process, regardless. That's my take on it. Yeah, I can't say that I have full faith in it. I have faith in the people to do their job to the best of their ability, but I think with any situation where there's a vulnerability, you know, we need to take the steps possible to ensure that we're protected. So, we'll see how things pan out. But I have faith in the people who are working there. But in terms of protecting against vulnerabilities, I'm not sure that we're there yet. That's what I would say. I'm not sure. I think we can do better. I think we can do better to protect against vulnerabilities within the programming, within the machines themselves. I think we can do better. Sure. Right. Yeah.
There's been a discrepancy between members of staff on the library and some of the members of the library board who have put forth candidates that they feel are appropriate representatives of library values, and the county commissioners have appointed um, their own, fully within their jurisdiction, their own candidates that have disagreed with some of those values. How do you feel about appointing people to a library board in terms of who you feel like should be represented there, and how much input you think the existing library staff and board members should have on those kinds of appointments?
Okay. Um, well, I kind of want to reiterate what I said before, but maybe in a different sense in terms of board appointments. I would encourage appointments to any of the boards, including the library board, which promote natural and civil order and help the library continue to be a wholesome atmosphere for all its patrons. But what? Sure, sure. I'll answer that in a second. I meant to say something else too. That first, like I really consider the library to be a very important asset to our community, and I really hope that it can continue to be so for all of its patrons. My family and I have really enjoyed the library for many years, even back when it was called the Flathead County Library when I was a kid here. And I want to upfront say I express my gratitude to those there who work really hard to provide good resources and creative ideas, and they have a lot of really great hands-on activities for kids that I think are wonderful. Um, and I would really like to see the library do more in terms of like lifelong learning. I'd love to see the library have more resources that help facilitate post-secondary, like after high school learning and degrees, trades, and stuff like that. So, to kind of circle back to your question there, so I define natural and civil order or civic order as self that which is grounded in self-evident truths. So the writers of the Declaration of Independence, they said we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, that all people are created equal, and that they're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, which among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So natural order is grounded in those self-evident truths. And so I would say that they are the norms that both nature and common sense dictate, and that social and moral guidelines and God-given rights help protect the innocent, encourage growth, and eradicate crime, disorder, and lawlessness. So that's how I would define natural and civil order.
And then just to down the road with the library, there
Sure.
currently some policy updates, um, and I know that you traditionally are somewhat control over the board, but it's something that I'm not the only
Yeah.
valued member of the commissioners that um, they're working through some policy changes at the library right now, some of which might allow them to remove books that they deem unfit for members of the population, or that they have issues with. Um, do you have any opinion on those kinds of policy changes and protecting um, certain people, youths, from accessing materials that may be inappropriate?
Okay. So, one thing I'd like to say is that, as long as the county uh, provides financial assets to the library, which amounts to like $1.7 million in the last 2022 budget, they have a vested interest in how the library runs. So that's done through the board and through its trustees. And I think that there is a secondary interest in the libraries that they've traditionally been community centers, and so the public has a vested interest in what goes on there. And um, So I think that there's this kind of sacred cow of non-censorship, that, well, you shouldn't ever censor anything because it's our First Amendment right. But even as a newspaper, you're restricted from saying certain things, certain words, certain things, because and the FCC has guidelines on what can be published on the radio. They can't publish obscene, indecent, and profane broadcasts, and that was even upheld by U.S. Supreme Court rulings, such as the National Broadcast Company versus United States. That those rulings help ensure that what is of public disclosure, that it remains within what I would go back to defining as natural and civil order. That it's appropriate for the community, and it also, I think, was, if you look at the Flathead County Ordinance Number 2, you can see that there's even county guidelines about the proliferation of obscene material. So people want to knock on they want to uphold that sacred, almost as a sacred ideal, but we have to acknowledge that on some level censorship does take place, and even in public libraries. That, I mean, if it weren't the case, we'd have pornographic magazines and X-rated videos readily available in the library, and we don't, and that's for good reason. And so there needs to be, I uphold the right of the board, to have that oversight. Like I said before, they have a vested interest in the library and what goes on in the library, and it's their right to review the decisions of the staff. It's their right to review the books that are placed there. That's part of why they're appointed as a board, and as long as there's that much finance is going to them, they're one of the top parts of the budget, $1.7 million. They have a vested interest, not just as a county, but for the community as a whole. And I know that, and I would say too, I know that the media has weighed in on it a little bit too. I've seen articles in the paper and stuff, uh, and maybe not the Interlake so much, but I've seen the media weigh in on it, and I think that they need to have a more balanced approach in looking at it, because even the newspapers can't publish libel. You can't publish anything you want. There's certain things, and it's not that anyone wants to restrict the freedom of the press or the freedom of speech, but it's about building a healthy community, about building a community that is good for all of its patrons.
Yeah, I appreciate you going down that side avenue. I know there's been a lot of questions and speculating, uh, uh, in terms of who the next commissioner is going to be, and I know that there's a lot of interest in board appointments across the board, and the health board and the library board. I think are
Sure,
most of these. I just want to make sure I've got some familiar background.
sure.
What what do you currently do? I know that you said you owned a business for 14 years.
Uh, yeah, over 14 years, which mainly has been window cleaning. We've also done some side projects of book and music publication, typing and editing, and custom art. But the bulk of it has been a window cleaning business. And I'm also a Montana certified secondary science teacher. I've spent probably over 1,200 hours in Flathead Valley Public Schools, working in them.
Mostly as a substitute.
Yeah, guest teacher. I've placed, as a certified teacher. Sometimes I've been asked to be in maybe a longer term role or a more responsible role than what would necessarily just be a substitute. But yeah, I've done quite a bit of substituting too. Uh, well, any secondary science, that's what I'm. So fifth through 12th grade, is what I'm certified to teach. But it's not something that I'm pursuing at this time. It's just something I have as a credentialing that I could down the road pursue, but it's not something I'm interested at this time in pursuing. Sure, sure. I love I love country life. I love hunting, skiing. I took my girls up skiing on Blacktail quite a bit this last winter. Just getting out and hiking and spending time in nature. I also do a bit of like amateur botany and music, and kind of have my hands in a lot of different little hobbies here and there. So that's kind of what I do for fun. I love foreign culture and language. I've studied Spanish and Hebrew. I lived in Israel for a while, and I just love culture and foreign language. So it's kind of a side interest of mine. I think it would be important just to kind of let readers know of some of my family background, just to connect the dots a little bit, because some of them might know, because we've been in the valley a long time, and my dad was a dentist in Columbia Falls. My grandfather, uh, Bob Orser, he practiced in dentistry in Kalispell. A lot of older people might connect with that name. And my great great grandfather was Sidney Martin Logan, and he was the first Flathead County attorney and the fifth mayor of Kalispell. And there's the Logan House over on Woodland Drive that belonged to him. And so we have a kind of deep history here in the valley. And the other thing that I would want to say too is really in terms of where we've been at, that this the game has changed, and this isn't business as usual. This isn't 2019, and people who kind of want to revert back to like the way we've always done things, I think are going to be sadly disappointed and mistaken to think that we can just keep doing things the way that we have been doing them. Like, if anything that we've learned over the last 2 years, it's really to be innovative and creative in finding solutions, and people with vision and youthful strength and resilience. And I don't want us as a community to do the safe thing. Regardless how this election turns out, I want us as a community to do the brave thing. And I really believe it's time for some fresh perspective and fresh energy. I believe it's time to pass the torch in multiple arenas, not just in government arena, but but I do believe that it's time to pass the torch and help find some creative solutions to the problems that we're facing. Yeah, yeah, sure, sure.